Brother Tariq, how are you doing? This is amazing, Sheikh. The amount of work, subhanallah, is something else. Uh, we have to discuss a lot with you, inshallah, even in the future. Especially, you seem to be a specialist in working with the youth and all of the different kind of problems this community, this country, and the world faces. MashaAllah, you seem to have a very good background in and dealing with the issues that, subhanallah, families to, and this is amazing. So we will have you on a different platform too, because when I see this, it's something else. Let's go to the topic itself, Sheikh. The topic is Allah's rule, subhanahu wa ta'ala, versus democracy. So if you want to begin with some thoughts, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah, first, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inna alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. Man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlil fala hadiya lahu. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. First and foremost, my brothers, I appreciate you guys bringing me on, alhamdulillah, for this very important topic.
It's an honor.
And alhamdulillah, I was traveling, so I didn't want to actually cancel out, but alhamdulillah, I thank you, brothers, for bringing me on, and I appreciate all the organizations who have orchestrated this and all the speakers who came before me. Alhamdulillah, I've seen that it was a wonderful program that is going on, that's very necessary and pertinent, especially in our community today. So, alhamdulillah, brothers, when we talk about the democracy versus Islam, I first want to change that, because nothing can be incompatible or in competition with Islam. I would say democracy in opposition to Islam, because there's no competition, there's no verse of anything, because the Islam supersedes anything, and it's the deen of Allah. So if anything is declining, it's not Islam, it's the Muslim, or the concept of secularism or communism or socialism or fascism. These are all systems that are based on man-made ideology, and Islam is the deen of Allah, so no one can challenge Allah and his deen. So I would say democracy in opposition to Islam. Inshallah.
MashaAllah. First of all, wallah, jazakallah khair. That is a correction that was needed. And MashaAllah, Shaykh, jazakallah khair. This, subhanallah. Continue, Shaykh.
And alhamdulillah, we understand the topic, but I like to be critical in thinking, especially today. People don't think well, and when they do, they don't do it very well. And so we want to be critical thinkers. Islam teaches us to be critical thinkers, and to put things in perspective. The language is also designed that way, that, the Arabic language of Quran always gives you exactly what it's talking about. It means what it means, and when you're expressing it, it expresses in a clear and concise, without ambiguity, right? And so therefore, it's very important to make those kind of distinctions so that we can have some kind of objective and focus on where we're going with this. So, in terms of, go ahead, Jake.
No, go ahead.
We talk about democracy in terms of Islam. First of all, if we just look at the former scriptures, and when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down the scriptures to all the prophets, the objective of that was to establish Allah's deen on the earth, and that everyone should be in conjunction to that. It wasn't for anyone to choose a way of life based on the way they feel that something should go. And so the problem itself is that when we choose other systems outside of the system of Islam, this becomes problematic, because from the beginning, remember, revelation was revealed to Jibreel alayhi salam, and he was sending down the message of Allah to the prophets that Allah chose, so that they could enforce the laws of Allah to govern man and his society on every level. And so in Islam, we know there's no separation of church or state as the Western world has done, has destroyed the concept of spirituality and the mundane world. Secularism is the changing features and the danger that has threatened the Muslim environment and the environment at large. And one of the reasons is it takes away it religious affiliated based society with where the religious concept is only a private affair, where that a person believes in whatever he wants to believe and he can worship his God in the closet. But when it comes to the political arena, then man has the ability to rule. These humanistic perspectives have caused the disease in the society, and that's why it creates this kind of hypocrisy. It's set up to create hypocrisy, separating church from state. It's as if you're taking the soul out of the body. And so secularism is to divorce the religious affiliation in people's lives so that they become inconsistent with living according to Allah's law. And so therefore it becomes this danger, this problematic situation where we have the Muslim state who are broken up, who have been separated for over centuries of years because of them leaving the Quran and the Sunnah. And so therefore they are subjected to the Western concept, such as secularism, and all the dangers that comes along with it, that takes out the practicality of people's lives. And it's just an ideology to believe privately, and everybody can have their own reality. Your truth is your truth, and my truth is my truth. And this is the kind of residue that leaves behind when individuals are choosing man-made law. For instance, democracy by itself lets you understand that it's for the people, by the people, which on the offshore, it shows that it's already set up for failure, because man cannot establish something better than Allah. And Allah says that who is the best, who judges, right, and who rules. Legislation, jurisdiction is for Allah alone, and He does not share anything with anyone. So we can see that when democracy is invented, you look up the word ideologically, the rule of the mob, democracy, it's based on man-made thoughts. Demos, right? Human convention. So therefore it's a failure already, because man is not able and he's not capable of ruling by himself. And so we can see many of the ramifications of that today.
Sheikh, a question. You started this thing with an amazing, you said that, look, we have to be critical thinkers. I mean, you mentioned two things. You said we have to be critical thinkers. Why is this that we don't find in many of the ulama today? I mean, you clarified it so well. You said this is saying democracy or comparing it with, secularism, let's say, it's like a soul, you're pulling the soul out of the body. That statement shows that you're so clear in how you understand democracy to be and the difference between the rule of Allah Azza wa Jal. If you can expound on that and on the critical thinking, why has that been taken away by even amongst the actually 90% of the ulama?
Absolutely, my brother. You see, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned something very important, and they were questioning, and it's a long hadith, but in terms of to address our situation, he was saying that there will be a time where people they won't be in their right state of mind. And the Sahaba said, so you're saying we're not going to be in our state of mind? He said, no. It'll be people who will be following something, and they think that they're upon guidance when they're not. Today, because of the mass media and the psychosis of indoctrination, people are losing how to think because they haven't allowed other machines and other people to think for them. And so one of it is the mass media, of course, how it controls and manipulates people to think critically. As today, people are thinking in the crowd. And I was reading this book called The Psychology of the Crowd. Most people will reject their own individual reflective thinking when they're in crowds. because most people are influenced by crowds and they go with the crowd. And despite the facts to what the crowd is projecting. And so people are designed to think, to buy, to believe according to someone else's ideas, someone else's understanding. So people no longer have their minds. And when he was speaking about that, just because people have an intellect, as I would say, he who has access to his intellect but does not activate it is worthy to be a fool. Because just because people have intellect doesn't mean that they use it. And so Allah tells us that He has given man intellect in order that he can think. But most people don't think. And when they do think, they don't think very well. You know, and so their minds have been controlled and isolated. I'll say colonized. The mind is colonized from thinking and using their own reflective judgment about things. It's all set up where individuals are to think one way. And this is their concept, their so-called New World Order, one government, one idea, one banking system, one judgment based on the Kafir system. And this is what they're implementing. And so people are no longer, and unfortunately it's the Muslims, because we have the best book and the guidance. There's nowhere in the world that Muslims are supposed to be tricked and fooled today with the guidance of the Quran and the Sunnah. We do understand why, but at the same time, in general, in essence, no Muslim is supposed to be deceived about their belief. What you believe and your worldview, because there's only two worldviews. The way we think is Quran. The way we think is Sunnah. That is the way that the Muslims are governed by an issue and how the Prophet Islam came. So you have two worldviews. You have the Jahiliyyah worldview and the Quranic worldview. And so the Muslims have to be able to think on the line of the Quran and stop always dealing with the rituals, but don't use it in their everyday life. You know, so critical thinking, the Quran tells us to think, you know, do you not reflect? There's the verses of reflection, you know, verses of consideration. أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ أَمْ عَلَى قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا. Do they not? And see, this thinking also has something to do with the heart, because a lot of times we lack that ideological clarity, and so our language becomes ambiguous. Thinking with the heart is the key to the Quran, and this is why Allah says, do they not reflect? Tadabbur is an attribute of the heart, where the heart has to be reflective, right? And considering and making judgments based on the evidences that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings us. So critical thinking, the Quran came uplift our intellect. It's not that we contribute as the intellectuals who believe that they have something so well versed in their minds that they can contribute to the Quran, right? When the Quran comes to uplift your thinking, right? You don't use your intellect on your own, but the Quran comes to correct your intellect and uplift it to understand the guidance that Allah is sending you. So critical thinking, the Quran is a book of istiqamah. It sets things straight and makes you think correctly. And when we look at the word aql, it means to steer, right? Like a person steering a horse so that the horse won't go off the cliff. So if your intellect does not steer you with right thinking and right way of guiding, then the person just only has intellect, but he doesn't access it, where that it steers him to right guidance, right understanding. You know, and so I'll always say that, deaf, dumb, and blind, and did not repair. And of course, this is spiritually, because these people have eyes, they have ears, and they have a mind. But it's because their intellect does not guide them to right thinking and right understanding.
Sheikh, there's a lot to unpack there. This is a lot of things, Ustaz. Wallah, yani. So, if you can give me let's say a mind map, how do you create this critical thinking process where people can differentiate between Jahiliyyah and Islam? Because, you know, democracy and what we're talking about here, I mean, it's very clear for the whole world that it's taken us to look at the dump that we have created in the world today, right? I mean, people are behaving like animals. right? People have, like you said, just because you don't have a mind doesn't mean that you know how to connect with it. So how do you? I'm gonna rule that. I'm gonna use that a lot now. But you know, can you a little bit of a critical thinking process? How do you build that?
First and foremost, purification of the heart, because the law says it is not their eyes that go blind, and it's not their ears that go deaf, but it's what's in their head. Right? In their hearts, there's a disease where it can't see and understand. Most people think about the mind in Western colleges that teach you that it's the mind, and they make the mind more superior than the heart, when it's actually the heart. And Allah mentions the heart. And when something's mentioned repetitiously, you have to grasp the importance of it. 136 times it talks about the qalb. And it's not talking about the physical, it's talking about the spiritual, right? So most people's intellects are blind, you know. Amiyah, it means to be blind in your mind and also in your heart, where the person it's like an intoxication. And ignorance is that kind of drink, you know, that people are drinking from, ignorance. And so ignorance intoxicates their thinking. So the key to that is to purify the heart, right? So that you can be able to see. This is the key to the Quran, is to open the heart so that one can see clearly, understand clearly. Comprehension is not just only from the mind. That Allah says, and do they not travel through the earth so that their hearts may gain wisdom, or their hearts may see or hear, right? So here we have a different understanding of hearing, seeing, and thinking. And basically that thinking comes from the core, which is the spiritual heart, that allows the person to have the vision and understanding. So we see all the attributes, basira, right, or firasa. These are necessary tools and attributes that a person must have in order for him to think clearly. Only the Quran can do this. The sad and unfortunate situation is that people don't understand the aspects of Jahiliyyah, right? And he who does not understand the aspect of Jahiliyyah is bound to fall into some of the aspects of Jahiliyyah. And that's why Umar ibn Khattab, he was mentioning, radiallahu anhu, he says that people's Islam will be broken off piece by piece, right? Especially for those who have not understood Jahiliyyah and those who don't even understand Islam, right? So when you have a better experience,
hold on, Sheikh, that's worst of the worst. Imagine people don't understand Jahiliyyah, and on the top of that, they don't understand Islam either. Where is human being?
Absolutely.
So I mean, so, are we? What do we? You know, I don't want to say it this way, but human being. What happened to human being? No Jahiliyyah, meaning they don't even understand the level of the deep mess that they are in. On the top of that, there is no access to Islam. Where are we as human beings?
And guess what? The humanity has to be gained, right? Just because you're a human and Allah says, and do they not, people who can walk upon the earth upright, just like you, most people exist, right? Gaining humanity is another level, just like a man. Manhood this is a different level. Womanhood, male, female, right? All of these are different levels of growth and progress. So a lot of times people think just because they have the structure of something, they believe they have it. But it's really the internal things that is applied, the science of how we learn and behave, like adab, right? So we say that people are well educated, right? Because they pass tests and they get degrees and things of that nature. But their manners and morals scores below 0, right? And so when we talk about the word adab, it means to be well educated in manners, right? You can't be well educated if you're not behaving morally, right? Even with all your capacities to pass tests and read and things of that nature. That's one level of the intellect. Hassan al-Basri mentioned this. He said that most people operate on one aspect of intellect, and that is the innate, right? That's naturally given to people, right? Something with have the ability to read and put the Rubik's cubes together and say how many presidents and memorize all the presidents, right? So we say, oh, he's very smart. This is one level of the intellect, the innate. The second is that you have to have fahm, understanding, comprehension, right? That's what gives you sense, right? The intellect has to be defined by itself, and that means being able to understand, right? When a person lacks comprehension and understanding, then he's just on the level of intellect. So his humanity has to be gained, right? Naturally, we're all human, but humanity, that's another level. As when you were speaking, it's another level. And it has something to do with all the aspects of your belief. Your aqidah is your worldview. The way we believe is the way we see the world, right? And the Quran always makes this distinction, right? الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا يُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Those who believe, they fight, they struggle in the way of Allah. وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا يُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ الطَّاغُوتِ. And those who disbelieve, they fight in the way of the Taghut. And the Taghut is a big range of everything, right? And so there's only two sides, right? And there's only really two understandings. One is the Jahiliyyah and the other one's the Islamic view. That is the way that we're supposed to be and think, you know.
So here's the thing. You said, again, there's a lot of things you said, but I'm going to put it in a, I mean, I just need your thoughts on this. Look, majority, like today's human beings, the way the masses think, right? Everyone in the world, including the Muslims, yelling and screaming and protesting for democracy, democracy, democracy. So you have that majority, mass ignorance, let's call that, right? I mean, I don't know. I want you to unpack that. But then on the other hand, you said something which is even more critical. You said we are even disconnected to our own humanity, and then so that means that we are not human. We are not even acting and behaving like human beings. So then, does democracy dehumanize human beings?
Absolutely. I was reading the magazine, Deconstruction God. That's what the title was, right?
Say that
Democracy,
again.
Deconstructing God. It was a title of the magazine called. So that means to take away people believing in the oneness, right? And so democracy takes away humanity. It takes away belief, right? And so it's empty. It's empty because it doesn't produce anything that's tangible where a person behaves morally like a human being. Look, there are laws where a person can turn into a man if she's a woman, or a woman turning into a man. These are all accepted, right? So the humanity is gone, the morals is gone, right? Where individuals accept and embrace all these kind of things that actually taints human behavior, human thinking, right? These are the operations of working off of the instincts, the animal instinct. See, man can also behave like an animal. So Allah says, and they're like cattle. No, they're worse than cattle, right? All because man, his intellect is supposed to make him have a distinction. That's what makes us distinction between animals and humans, our intellect. So what happens when a man who has it, but yet does not activate it? He acts on the animalistic level, right? And so
Instincts,
he's inclined to behave like an animal.
So, okay, and now, understanding, Sheikh. You said, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ. Okay, so can you clearly just define the difference between the rule of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in opposition to democracy? Yani if we were to, because I have to take questions are coming in. I need to know if you can define that, and then we'll start the questions.
Okay. Yes. First and foremost, Islam in that case is that we choose Allah as the ruler of all things. All laws come from Allah. It's all judgment comes from Allah. Allah is the only one who has the ability to legislate. It is Allah who we establish everything based on. The Tawheed, the oneness of Allah, or the Tawheed Hakimiyya, which is basically the oneness of Allah's rule. That's what Allah sent the Quran for. to establish the oneness of Allah and nothing else. And if you look at the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, their whole mission was to establish the Islamic State. Before you can do that, you have to have an Islamic state of consciousness, right? And so a lot of times people are thinking Western. Democracy is to establish kufr, clearly.
The
right?
state of kufr.
This is what, right, straight up kufr, that's the bottom line. The way we want to establish Tawheed is the way they want to establish kufr. They mention it in their manifestos, they're promoting it, they're practicing it, and it's all about kufr. Disbelieve, do what you want, right? Kufr to millah wahida. The Prophet ﷺ said, kufr is one system, but it manifests in many ways, right? So Islam, simply, Allah tells us to worship Allah, turn to Him, Tawheed uluhiyah, right? And the beautiful names of Allah, Tawheed al-Asma wa Sifat. This is the establishment, that's what Allah said, and that's what the Muslims have to return back to.
Just a question here. How do we differentiate, Sheikh? Because some people argue, somebody was saying, so if somebody supports democracy as a Muslim, what is the Islamic view on this? Does that take them out of Islam, or they are doing actions of jahiliyyah or actions of kufr?
Yeah. So Allah mentions in the verses, وَمَا لَمْ يَكُنْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. In one case, definitely whoever does not judge by the light of Allah is a fasiq, right? And then the other one is, of course, the zalim, the wrongdoer, and the kafir. We won't say, according to the scholars, that a person is judged. We have to know that the person actually believes that democracy rules over the Sharia. That if he believes that the democracy should be the rule and not Islam, of course, this is a concept of kufr, right? And if he's establishing the democracy over Islam and he believes that it should be the dominant factor, this is kufr. Most of the Muslims, and in many cases, you see a lot of Muslims who are establishing democracy. It is definitely forbidden for the Muslims to call to democracy, definitely. Because the Prophet ﷺ, he never sat down with those who were in demise of his message. And he never compromised or tried to infiltrate when he went to Medina. He didn't try to get with the government, nor did he overthrow it. He needed that time and that years to establish Islam, which became the head of the state, right? So many Muslims are talking about Islam as the true democracy. That's wrong, because Islam is an Arabic word and democracy is a Greek Roman word, and there's two different concepts, and you could never compare that. Islam is not a democracy, period. Not for the people, by the people. It's by Allah, for Allah, and that everyone must govern their lives. So when Muslims are advocating, and they always go into the ballot, see, as of African American descent, right, the voting never worked, period. Everything, whether you have a Democrat or a Republican, the same thing stinks. The reason why it's unlawful for us to call, Allah mentions in Surah An-Nisa 105, and just by what Allah has sent down, and do not be an advocate for the treacherous, the ones who betray their trust, promises things, right? Allah sent the Quran down to be a judge. Advocating for a democracy, and the reason why voting becomes unlawful, I'm going to tell you why. Number one, because they make what Allah makes haram, they make it halal. And what Allah makes halal, they make it haram. That is the reason, right? Voting itself, within itself, is not the haram part. The haram part is because they make what Allah makes halal, they make it haram. And what Allah makes haram, they make it halal. That's why. And so therefore, Muslims should never be involved in the political activism on these levels, believing that something is going to change. Nothing has changed. Rather you have a Democrat or Republican, it always stays still in opposition to the laws of Allah, right? So therefore, it's a very detrimental for the Muslims to be running to the back. I really don't understand in this late day and time why Muslims are promoting this.
Sheikh, that's question. You said something. Look, voting never worked, and you, as an African American, somebody who's been here since through the whole situation, since or seen all the struggles for the last hundreds of years in this country, and the struggle of the African Americans today, whether oppression, all of the things. You know, today's so-called minorities that we have today here, right? Especially the Muslims who are coming into this country and things like this. You see the constant push. Oh, we have to get involved. We have to get involved. We have to have. We gotta talk about our rights, and they will help us build masajid and things like this. Is it that the Muslims in this country have a lot to learn, and this is why they're talking like this, or is it that they have never learned and they're gonna have to learn?
Absolutely. A lot of times it's based, again, we always got to always remember anything that you don't know and you promote as if you know, this is jahl, this is ignorance. A lot of times they have false hope, right? They have false hope, and they actually are weak in faith. It's no doubt. Your aqidah tells you what you choose, what you believe, what you think. And it doesn't mean you're not a Muslim. But we know that there's weak Muslims and strong Muslims, and the stronger Muslim is more beloved to Allah than the weak Muslim. So in all of them is good, but at the same time, this acceptance of trying to get involved instead of building your own. We're always advocating for someone else's system and don't benefit. And instead of pushing the agenda that the Prophet ﷺ, and we've seen the success in that. A lot of Muslims are so intimidated, right? And they're giving up. And some of them, they really actually love the lifestyle of America. And everyone, you can choose the above. In every category, everyone fits under these. Ultimately, they're lacking the faith, the courage, right? To believe that the system of Islam does work. Getting involved, what do you mean getting involved? Why don't we use the energy and time to establish Islam? How about that? And we don't have to go to Saudi to do that. You can establish Islam right in where you at, right? The resources are being misused and abused. You know, we're gathering together, right? We have all these organizations that have been into existence for 30 years, and they get these awards, just like the BET Awards, and they get bragging about how long we've been this and how long the organization of this, the founder of that. We have got caught up into the American organizationalism, where that we just become organizations with the sprinkles of tops of Islam. This is what's happening. And the ones who are promoting it is, unfortunately, our leaders who claim to be the face of Islam of North America, right? And yet, still, we have not developed any of the ingredients that we know from Medina, right? In the time of the seerah of the Prophet of Islam, none of that. Because when you do that, that means that you can't drive your Lexuses. You can't have the positions you have. You can't be in position the way you want. Why? Because opposition. And a lot of Muslims don't want to face opposition as if they don't want to leave this world, right? They forget that this is temporary, right? We sacrifice our life, our death, our property, everything. That's what we committed to. When you say La ilaha illallah, that's trouble for many of people. Why? Muhammad Rasulullah, because there was always kufr and Imam cannot coexist in the same hearts of a believer. No way, right? It's either Islam, and in order for you to establish Islam, right, you have to remove whatever contradicts it. Whatever contradicts Islam and you have in your heart, you have to get rid of that, right? The truth cannot coexist. It has no room for falsehood in a believer's heart, right? And so this is why it becomes problematic, because Muslims are falling to the system that is in demise hope of the Muslims. They can never demise Islam. So that's the deen of Allah, right? But they're in demise of the message of the people, and somehow people have this false hope believing they're going to accept you. You know, it doesn't matter. They have an agenda, right? And so therefore, I think when people don't understand truly Islam comprehensively, they fall into these kind of categories, right? Thinking that we can separate church and state too. You know, I'm Muslim, yeah, I'm doing this, but politics, I got to get involved. Now, there's a level of that, but we're not even organized to be even on our own platform to challenge that, to be able to deal with that. We need people who know what they're doing. We don't need people to compromise. We don't need people to sell out. We don't need people who are trying to fit in. And that's the problem. The Muslims keep trying to fit in, right? Thinking that they're going to accept you. And Allah told you they're not. You know, the system works for them, right? And Allah tells you that they wish that you turn on your heels like them. Allah warns us constantly, right? But unfortunately, we're not paying attention to the book.
Sheikh, I mean, is this what has created this defeatist mentality? What is that? If you can, what is it that we don't have our agenda? We don't want to talk Islam the way it is. We want to compromise. We want to get accepted. And then you said all of this comes from lack of iman. If you can define that, is it that we don't understand our aqidah? What is missing here?
Absolutely. So iman related to Allah is a personal affair. One person has to establish his relationship with Allah. That's where it starts. And that has to be tight. So when we read these verses, we can't read them or apply them out of context. I think when we say we have taqwa, it's when we're in a time of peace. You can't determine if a person has taqwa in a time of peace. When we say we have sabr, right? We cannot tell that in a time of peace. And all those pretty attributes that everyone claims outside of the context of the experience, you cannot tell that. It's only when you're in the eye of the storm to know sabr. Patience is a word that is defined through being in trials, right? And you standing the test in that trial. People's faith is out of context. They believe in the Quran. They believe in Allah. They believe in the messenger on that level. But when it comes to applying that in the circumstances and situations we found him in that we read about, that's where the person becomes inconsistent, right? They're not ready to face the challenges of the sunnah when it comes to suffering, when it comes to where people are opposing you, right, with that belief. They maintain their belief at the most dire situations where they were boulders of rocks was put on Bilal. People were getting slaughtered and killed, and they would still say, Ahad, Ahad, La ilaha illallah. That's when you know what taqwa is. You can't know it other than that. Other than that, it's just an ideological phrase that we use because it's an Arabic word that we learned that we have to have. But knowing when you have it is when you're in a time of difficulty, when you have to challenge the individuals who are opposing you. Most of the people are compromising. They're selling out. And I have some personal stories. I know they're selling out. So I'm saying that. Now, does this take him out of the fold of Islam? No, I'm not saying any of that. But he's under question, though. When he begins he's definitely under question. His faith is under question. His taqwa is under question. His tawakkul, everybody, trust in Allah. Out of context, though, right? But yet, they will use secondary means of the people who are the enemies, right? When they say, trust in Allah, Allah is our cure, shifa. But then they'll go to the doctor looking for some shifa from them, right? So their tawakkul is loose as well. All of these things have to be known and understood in the context. Reading it is different. When you experience it, it gives you a total understanding. You learn these verses through experiences, not just reading in the month of Ramadan, right? That's real. You get blessings, yeah. But understanding the Quran is when you actually experience it. So that verse that you read and you went through it, it increases the believer's faith and hope because he knows what to expect when he faces another trial because Allah showed him that he protected him and guided him. Most people don't rely on Allah totally, right? They don't.
So look, I'll give you for instance, in India, it's supposed to be the largest democracy in the world. And then Muslims are facing an almost a genocide in many ways. I was watching yesterday, they were talking about openly that they're saying that the Muslims, they just don't belong in India, let's put it this way. And talking about comparing it to that, what they need to do, maybe what they did to Rohingya, for instance, to the Muslims of India. But the ulama class continues to say, we believe in the Constitution of India, we believe in this democracy or this or that. And you have masses who don't know what to do, although they are under the knife directly. So the question to you, Sheikh, is: does democracy blind people from seeing even reality that exists right in front of you, and keeps you in denial?
Absolutely. The problem is that, again, in order for you to see or to establish an Islamic state, you have to have an Islamic state of consciousness. And so, therefore, democracy definitely, and the Muslims don't do just estimation. If they go down the line and see all the principles and the protocols of democracy and then compare it to Islam, critically, they'll begin to see how definitely democracy is cooked. They will see that. Unfortunately, it's a lack of both. It's them not wanting to see it and them giving up hope and believing in nationalism. And he who calls to nationalism, the Prophet said, he's not of us. Who calls to their national, their ethnic group, they're not of us. You know, calling to something other than Allah, that is not the mission of bringing democracy. And democracy don't even work for the average person. Look how people are suffering under democracy, right? Oppression everywhere, economic exploitation, social degradation, right? Everywhere under democracy. Look what happened. Nothing. Look at police brutality on a high level. This is so-called American democracy, which Malcolm said is nothing but hypocrisy. You know, it never worked for especially the African descent people. It never. All the 60s and the struggles in the past with the Black Panthers and all that clearly was showing you that democracy does not work, especially when people are not trying to benefit you, right? You advocating for them, they never give you nothing in return, right? So again, the Muslims are blind through democracy, but that ain't really the issue. Their issue is they don't have a strong relationship with Allah. Because if anyone who has a strong relationship with Allah will never want to advocate or choose any system except Islam. They would never want to go back.
100%. But what I'm saying is, there's no question about that. But on the to be to be critical on the issue of democracy, the way the people bring this out, and they say, okay, look, they look at the Western development and they say, look what has democracy produced, right? This is what they look at. Technology and all this and that. But Sheikh, if you look at it on the world level, majority of the people are suffering in every possible way. I guess the question I'm asking is that what does democracy do to shut the thinking or to create this wall between yourself and the mind and from seeing the reality? If you can can explain that a bit, because I want the people to see that in reality it's pushing us to be only working at the animalistic level.
Yes. Well, again, if people really, you got to really go into the aspects of democracy. What blinds people is because it gives people a false sense of security, a false sense of power, where that you believe that you can vote for who you believe to bring people in office. You're looking at technology and all the advancements, which basically is not an advancement. Civilization is not based on technology. Civilization is based on morals. And the reason why the Roman Empire suffered is because they were immoral-based society, right? And so their military was exhausted, and all the military power that they had, they still fell in demise. Why? Because it's not based on morality, right? Islam is based on morality. It gives people dignity, right? It gives people honor. It gives people justice. Democracy has never given no one justice. So we asked the people, I asked someone this. I said, tell me what democracy have done. Tell me what the Democrat done for you. And none of them could give any kind of real answer, right? None of them. And it's all because of, like you said, democracy does blind people into a system that they believe that is based on all hope. It's just like a raffle. casting your vote for which one, this one, when actually you're not even in control of it because the electoral is in control. So you've seen over and over, they've seen all these signs that when they wanted the criminals not to be voted in, they got it, like Donald Trump, President Bush, and many all the criminals who went into office, even when you claim that the majority will rule, they still come out winning to let you know that it's a failure, right? And you put in your trust in a system that has no future for you. It's an oligarchy, you know? It's ruled by a class of people, both parties. They don't understand this, right? They don't understand the game.
Let me ask you, do you think that one of the goals, I mean, we are seeing that amongst the Muslims today. I have to take some questions, but I have to ask you this too.
Okay.
Do you think that they are creating a class of Muslims who are very well off, very rich, too much to lose, and this group of people who are, let's say, controlling the masajid, controlling the organizations, controlling mass thought process amongst the Muslims here, to create that oligarchy class within the Muslims so they can control what happens in this country and even around the world, but specifically this country, because you see even the imams that are pushing this and who are promoted, I mean, they live in amazing neighborhoods, and you know, they're given all types of platforms, and they are the moment the guy starts speaking, you have 1 million people watching them. They're promoted, Facebook promotes them, YouTube promotes them, but we don't see imams like you who are born and raised here, who've seen it all. But I've never heard you before.
MashaAllah, Dick. And that's how it goes. Now, welcome to the commercialization of imams and scholars. They always had this in the Knights Templar time, and the Crusaders, who traitors and hypocrites, who betrayed the Muslims. That's the history of Islam, even in the time of the prophets of Islam. The author of Quraysh. You always had this aristocrats who were always trying to separate, as they call the good Muslim and the bad Muslim, the secularist Muslim or the progressive Muslim. They always put us in these class systems for reasons for separation, to make those distinctions, right? And they empower the Muslim leaders so they can gain control over the masses. And that's what they do with their American system. You know, the preachers they go to the preachers and the churches, right, to control their masses for the votes and things of that nature. So the Muslims, they buy into the same thing. You know, the board of directors is the key, number one, corporation, right? They're no longer masjids for Allah. These are corporations. They sold the masjids to the corporations, right? And that's why they act like it's their business, right? These leaders, these board of directors. This is a model of kufr anyway. The board of directors, that's not the Islamic model. It never was, right? And they put these
and even the board of directors, mostly the rich and the influence.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
It's no longer the house.
You don't find the ulama in it. You don't find the scholars in it. You don't find fuqaha in it. Hold on, Sheikh. No. Let me take the questions. Go ahead. First question.
Okay.
Number one, why do people fear Sharia law so much?
Well, it's really, the Muslims fear it too. Because basically they know that they can't live the way they live, right? They couldn't usurp and cheat and steal and hide the way they do. That's why they fear it, because they know that the Sharia brings justice, equality, and it takes away that class system that they are, aristocrat class system that they're established on. Now, for the non-Muslims, they fear the same thing, because just like Fir'aun feared that Musa would change his deen, and he said that. He said, I fear that this Musa will change your deen, your way of life, your policies. The non-Muslims understand Islam in ideology so much because they study the history. They understand that Islam is the most powerful force and the greatest challenge. And that's why they're always using all these obstacles to try to blow out the light of Allah, like Allah says. You know, they tried to blow out the light of Allah with their mouths, but they will not. Allah will perfect His light, even though the Kafirs made the testing, right? So they have this fear, right, of we call it paranoia of unjust leadership, right? Because they understand that Islam is the way, and so they don't want the people to know that. So people fear it from the Muslims because they can't get over anymore. They don't want to practice Islam that way, right? They don't want to believe the Sharia that way. They try to make the Sharia seem like it's a butcher shop or something of that nature, but actually it's just because they don't want to live according to what Allah expects.
Man, I have questions, but I have to take these questions. Go ahead. I had, go ahead. This is from Jawad Ahmed. MashaAllah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect Imam Tariq and elevate his ranks in this world. And next, how do we Muslims change our situation and get out of this dilemma?
Well, Allah can only say it better than me. He said, never will Allah change the condition of the people until they change the condition with their own self. And then the other ayahs, Allah will not change the ni'mah, right? Unless the Muslims, meaning the favor that He already bestowed on us, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We need to just apply the Quran, pray Allah and His Messenger. We have to change the way we think, right? The thinking and the way the misconceptions around Islam and how we understand it. The cultural differences, we got to get rid of that. We have to make Islam the priority over all other ways, right? And so getting out of this dilemma, getting aware and educating yourself more. Most of us were following Islam based on parental guidance, meaning your mother raised you as a Muslim. You never really went into the text yourself. You probably didn't even get into the fiqh or understanding it personally. And that's why I said building that personal relationship with Allah for each and every one of us is a duty and a responsibility to seek knowledge, right? It's obligatory for every male and female to educate itself.
But Sheikh, look, even with the what are your, seeking knowledge? People are, the moment I want to seek knowledge and I put a Sheikh something to learn, and I hear some weird scholar talking to me about whatever, right? I mean, people want to learn. It's not that people don't want to learn, people want to understand. But the moment I go to YouTube, the moment I go to something, I get a scholar who's standing out there on the street with everybody else saying hallelujah.
And see, that's the problem. We're looking for someone as a person to give us the deen instead of we ourselves seeking out what the scholars have said of the past.
So connect with the past scholars, classical
Absolutely.
scholars.
And I'm talking, and see, we don't even consider Abu Bakr a scholar, and those are the first generation. We look at scholars of the 21st century as a hindrance. So we choose secondary people as scholars and don't look at the best generation that the Prophet ﷺ said. This present ummah will never be rectified until we rectify with the first generation. Those are the scholars, and they never called themselves such. Now we got into this again, westernization. Scholars is used just like ice cream. People just scholar this because he speaks this well. But people have to personally go back to the Prophet Muhammad, right? Atiullah wa atiur Rasul. Obey Allah and the Messenger. And he said, I leave these things, the Quran and Sunnah, Khulafa ar-Rashidin. These are the ones who established the glory of Islam. And that's the people who we should refer back to. We have middlemen, right? We'll use 12th century scholars over the first generation, 21st century scholars over the first generation. He who acts without knowledge will corrupt more than they rectify. And that's the problem. We need to go back to the first generation of the scholars who we know have done it, who we know that's guaranteed paradise, right? And people have to have an individual relationship with that, what the Prophet left for.
Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Next. What if they don't know and we can't teach them to do da'wah? So for that reason, they accept and support democracy.
The Prophet ﷺ already prophesied that Islam will rise on all the four corners of the earth, even if in a mud house or straw house. There's no such thing. Umar ibn Khattab, he said, there's no more excuses for Islam has been established, right? There's no excuses for any of us. Islam has been established. There's no more excuses. It's people who come up with these excuses, right? There's nowhere in the world they don't know. They do know. It's about you seeking and researching and
being sincere to Allah.
And be sincere to Allah.
Last question, if there's any more. Because there are a lot of questions, I'm sure, and I ask, let's say 3 questions, and then we'll end.
Okay.
Because time is over, but we need to ask, how about people who use the excuse of maslaha, yani benefit, or to protect your identity as a Muslim as an excuse to go and vote in democratic elections in Western countries?
This is a great question, because the usul al-fiqh, when we talk about maslaha and benefit, right? First of all, the maslaha cannot be used when you have direct evidence from the sources. So the Prophet ﷺ said, if you don't find something in the Quran, where you go? He said, to the Sunnah. If you don't find it there, then where you go? To the Sahaba. And when you do qiyas. Now qiyas, we got to be careful. You don't use your own opinion. Circumstantial evidence is from related to the same source, right?
Sheikh, where did you study? Where did you study?
Well, I studied here, brother, in America. I was under some good
This is unbelievable, brother. This is something else. I mean, subhanallah. May Allah bless you and raise your status, akhi. Wallah al-azim.
I mean.
Something else. We got to get on a phone conversation after this. But that's going to happen tomorrow, inshallah, bismillah. May Allah love you, akhi. Next question. How is the push for democracy affecting the Muslim youth in the United States?
I mean, Sheikh just gave us an example. Sheikh, you gave an example how democracy, Muslims are slaughtering people. Yeah. Look at the youth today. They're not in the masjid, they're on the corners, right?
Yes.
Look at, they're losing their identity. You see, look what democracy, you got to look at what's going on in your environment. If you keep watching CNN, then you're going to be blind, right? And all the TV shows and what they're showing and all these organizations that's promoting Islam in the name of Islam, you got to get away from that. Those are the delusions, right, that's being projected. But look at the youth today. They no longer even know how to pray. Yeah. Why? Because
they're entertaining themselves to death.
Definitely. Social media is the greatest challenge to our youth today. It has taken their minds away from studying, right? That's how you dumb down America, through technology. Technology is not advancement. You know,
dumbing down of the masses.
Morally advanced.
Subhanallah, we will have to end that. Believe me, I don't want to end this session.